Ein Europa, das in einer globalisierten Welt seiner Verantwortung gerecht wird, weil es seine Werte und Interessen weltweit behaupten will, das muss ein solidarisches Europa sein. Alles andere wird scheitern.
Griechenland hat sich verpflichtet, keinerlei einseitige Maßnahmen zu ergreifen, ohne Abstimmung mit den 3 Institutionen. Keinerlei einseitige Maßnahmen, die Auswirkungen hätten auf das Programm. Griechenland hat sich verpflichtet, alle Gläubiger gleichmäßig, vollständig und zeitgerecht zu bedienen.
They complain now about fake news. They created them against us. They complain about loony, mad policies, economic policies. They impose them upon us, and they keep doing it. They talk about democracy being an important idea. They destroyed our democracy.
Greece has been strongly affected by the financial crisis. Many Greek citizens have lost their jobs and struggle to survive day by day. While the Greek economy is in a deep crisis, 60,000 refugees who arrived seeking protection in Europe remain trapped in the country. Several thousands of them are forced to remain on the Greek islands. To reach safety in Europe, they crossed the Aegean Sea in rubber dinghies from Turkey. But now they are stuck. The EU-Turkey deal, implemented in March 2016, forces them to wait on the islands for the examination of their asylum applications. Some refugees have been waiting in barbed wire camps for 18 months under the constant threat of being deported. On Lesvos Island, about 5,000 people are forced to stay in the European hotspot camp Moria in shabby tents or containers.
When I arrived here, they put me in Moria camp. It's kind of prison, actually. It's not camp anymore. I was sleep at like a people in the tent in the winter. You cannot imagine how it was very cold, really cold. And this tent, it doesn't help with that. And it was snowy, and when you wake up, you feel like you are like ice cream. And also the food there, the water there in Moria, nothing good. Like we are like 3,000, more than 3,000 there, and you can imagine if you want to stay or wait in the line to take your food, the breakfast or the lunch or the dinner, you have to wait like 1 hour or more.
The sanitation is very, very poor because over 6,000 people using 20 toilets and 20 bathrooms. The sanitation is very, very poor. So a lot of people have to get a lot of diseases.
In Moria, women get raped, insulted and threatened. During the 2 weeks we were there, we only went to the toilet when we really had to go. And we always asked our brothers to accompany us and went in a group because we were afraid that something would happen to us.
When we reached Greece, we were transferred to a refugee camp in the town of Varti. It was dark. They took our fingerprints and did all their legal procedures. Then they gave us blankets and some cold food. Go to bed now, they told us. We received a tent for 2 persons, where we slept with 4 people and our backpacks, but it was so cold that night that we didn't care. We could even have slept outside in the camp without feeling the difference. We had to queue for food in this terrible cold weather. The food itself didn't have any protein and didn't give us any energy, so many of the people there lost a lot of weight.
For the water also, sometimes 3 days we stay without water. In the winter we had water actually, because it's winter, but it's always was cold water. And about the papers, it's other story. You have to go every day to the asylum office, every day in the morning early, at 7:30 or 8. You have to be in front of the door, and you will start shouting, and they will start shouting for you every day like that, and you will go back like nothing.
The health service is very, very bad. Anytime a refugee goes to hospital, the doctors are not there to take care of you. And even if they take care, what the medicine that they give you is paracetamol.
There were many people who committed suicide in front of the UN office. There was an Iraqi family where the husband died in front of the UNHCR field office. I think the man had been greatly affected by the cold and the conditions of the camp. He had become very sick and very weak. He pushed himself to go to the healthcare clinic at the camp. "I need help, I'm sick," they told him. "Sorry, it's lunchtime, we can't help you, it's time for the doctors to have their Freddo espresso now." He replied, "I'm very, very sick, I need your help." No, it's not possible," they responded, and shut the doors before him. The sound of the closing door is still echoing in my head. After 10 minutes, he knocked on their door again. "I'm sick, I need help," he told them. They replied, "We're still having lunch." The man died just a few minutes after that, in front of those self-declared defenders of those human rights that are no more than a nice lie. He just died. His wife was tearing her clothes apart. I think both out of sorrow and out of anger. Right there, all her dreams broke into pieces. What would she do in Europe now? She wanted to be in Europe with her husband and her children. Right there, she'd become the mother of a fatherless child and the widow of a dead husband. Everything she had, she lost right there. They dispossessed her from everything. The conditions had made that tragedy possible. In that camp, human life was not worth anything at all. These conditions I'm talking about, they're true for all refugee camps in Greece. Some of the people who were there agreed to be voluntarily deported. Some of them died, some committed suicide, others survived and somehow left the camp.
Winter is coming. Last year, 6 people died in Moria alone, and this year people will once again be forced to sleep on the ground in water-soaked tents. The conditions have hardly improved, and people will once again be exposed to deadly risks in Europe's refugee camps. Refugees refuse to wait for the lengthy asylum procedure in these life-threatening conditions. The communities join together and go on protest marches. Supported by Greek locals and international solidarity groups, they fight for their rights and demand freedom of movement. On Lesvos, refugee activists occupied the central Sappho Square in the town of Mytilene. They demanded that the European Union opens the islands.
We came here because we oppose the living situation in Moria camp. We feel humiliated in the camp, and I came here to tell the people that this is against my rights. Therefore, I demand from the European Union that they find solutions for refugees, because winter is coming, and it is likely that many people die here.
We try to organize ourselves. Some of the leaders in the various countries try to come together and organize a meeting with the authorities to tell them our problem, to tell them our needs. We've been doing this thing for so many months, but they are not listening to us. So we try to organize demonstration for the outsiders to listen to us, for the NGOs who are there to help us to listen to us. So we became the voice of the voiceless. They deported a lot of Africans after the demonstration. And they started arresting the leaders. They started to torture us, but we still keep on fighting.
After months of waiting in a state of limbo on the Greek islands, some refugees are eventually arrested and deported. Others are finally allowed to move on to the Greek mainland. But this does not guarantee them a better future. Many people who are seeking asylum in Europe have no option save sleeping rough on the streets of Athens, even those who have been granted international protection status already.
When you are deported back to Turkey, it's like you are going back to hell, because a country called Turkey has no human rights. And imagine being in the prison of Turkey. They are dividing families, deporting the husband and giving the wife asylum, deporting the parents and giving the children asylum, because there is a girl of 9 years who was deported back to Turkey. This is nobody understands.
When I get my asylum, that nothing changed every time. Because I'm here now, and without job, without money, without study, without anything. It's the same thing.
I've seen many people being granted and say, now what? Where am I going to stay? Where am I going to work? Yeah, I think it's even worse.
The accepting asylum in Greece is even worse. No accommodation for you, no food for you. They leave you to go to the mainland and struggle. A lot of people had their asylum and they are in the mainland sleeping on the streets, ending up as drug addicts. It's happening in Athens, in Thessaloniki, all the mainland. People are stranded because you've accepted the person asylum. The person is in need of education. You have children who are in need of education. You've abandoned them to go to the mainland and go and struggle.
So I know people who have the refugee status who live in the street here in Greece.
I live on the street. Once I didn't eat for 3 days. When I was new here, I didn't know anything. I didn't know that there were certain organizations who were giving out food. I didn't eat for 2 or 3 days, and I slept on the street, or I still sleep. When it comes to food, I can eat enough to at least not die.
The asylum seekers have access to a cash card and are supposed to be entitled to accommodation by public authorities, by the state, while once they're granted asylum, once they're granted refugee status, they're considered to have equal rights with a Greek citizen, so they're not entitled to accommodation as a refugee or for a cash card. So they're practically thrown out on their own to integrate, to find a job without having access to really special integration programs.
So they're actually excluded once more. So they get a paper, but obviously this does not mean that they are included within the society.
I have a refugee status, but I cannot find enough food to eat. A friend of mine even brought his ID card and passport back to the asylum service in Katachaki. They asked him, "Why do you want to return your documents?" And he replied, "I am hungry. I need food."
They don't have food. They have to wait outside an NGO's door to get one-time meal for one bread. They have to wait like hours over there. This is humiliation. This is an insult of humanity that you have to wait for 2 hours for one piece of bread.
You have the full right to work, to access the work market from the moment you have the full registrations, and of course as a recognized refugee you have the right to work. But that's the right, and in the other hand we know the situation here in Greece, which is for the Greek people already really difficult. So for refugees who, for example, don't speak the Greek language or have a lot of things to deal with, it's even more complicated to have a real access to work.
They can also get something welfare benefit, but it's also a lot of paperwork, and they also need someone to provide this information, which is, I mean, I don't know about it, and I'm Greek. I don't know about it, how to access this. It's a mess, and they don't have interpreters in public services.
There's no job here. If there is a job, the wages is so low. I mean, like, I have seen people who are working here for 15 euros per day. I mean, sometimes they have to work more than 8 hours, like 12 hours or 16 hours. I mean, there are people who are trying to take advantage just because they are refugees. Sometimes they don't know the language, and they have to work really, really hard. They don't have that respect. They are treated like a second-class human. Sometimes I call them subhumans. They are treated as subhuman.
As a result of the economic crisis, it is not only refugees who have to fight for life on the streets. Greek citizens have suffered heavily from the impact of the financial crisis and the austerity measures that have been imposed upon them by the European Union.
Some of the austerity measures that have been taken these past 8-9 years now is salary cuts, mass redundancies in all sectors, and obviously in the public sector mostly, cut down in pensions. The European Union and the partners of Greece have been dealing with economic crisis in a sterilized way. I mean, the measures come from a sterilized bubble that doesn't take into consideration the culture or the grounds of the problem. How can you deal with a problem if you don't know its roots? So not knowing its roots, the austerity measures that are imposed are inefficient.
The housing market here is on ground, nothing, zero.
Under the burden of the debt, so many people, they ended up on the street because of tax foreclosures. Their houses were confiscated by the tax service, or they saw their houses being sold because, taken away from them because they couldn't pay the debt, the loans, they couldn't pay off the loans.
Lately I have seen many Greek people who are homeless, who are jobless, who don't have money.
While the Greek state is unable to provide basic services for refugees, grassroots initiatives offer food, medical and legal support. Refugees work in these self-organised structures, supporting one another. Greek citizens are also involved, showing strong solidarity with the refugees staying in their country.
The idea of City Plaza was to provide, on the one hand, a decent accommodation space for people who were in need, especially after the signing of the EU-Turkey agreement. There were thousands of people in Athens trapped in the mainland Greece, that were homeless, they were really in need of housing. And at the same time, we are thinking of City Plaza as a counterexample to the dominant policies of bordering and controlling people. And in this way, we wanted to be also a center of struggle around the issues of refugees' rights, migration, anti-fascism. Now there are around 340 people living inside. It is a choice to defend the people who are deprived. And this is a much more general choice. It's not only about migrants or refugees, but it's also for poor people. It's also for people who are excluded from different social or political regimes of rights. Racism, for example, is not a problem for migrants, it's a problem for everyone. So it's for our societies that we are fighting against racism. It's not that we are fighting for someone else.
I am a volunteer here in Khora. Actually, I came here as a refugee. I was in need. I was so hungry. And somebody told me that the Khora is a place where you can go and you can have some food or some other help you need, your basic needs. So I give information because I have very good idea, very good knowledge about Greek system, the legal system, and how these offices they work, where to go. Khora has helped me so much, so I should do something to pay back, to do something for these people. They are doing so great work.
All over Greece, refugees have decided to leave the prison-like camps they are supposed to stay in. They refuse to become passive objects of the European migration management regime. Instead, many refugees stay in squatted buildings, living autonomous and self-determined lives.
For us, squatting was also a kind of an act that would challenge some of the very foundational ideas of our societies. Like, for example, private property is supposed to be one of the most sacred rights within capitalism. So we are also challenging this, like, what is more important? To have empty buildings that are not used in the center of the city, or to house 400 people who are in need, for example.
Many asylum seekers and accepted refugees see no future for themselves in Greece. They try to leave the country and move on to Central Europe, but they are trapped. The Greek-Macedonian border is strongly secured. Jawad Sharif is one of the people who tried to escape from Greece, even though he had already been accepted as a refugee in the country. But he did not succeed and was pushed back when he tried to cross to Italy.
My future is still unclear. Greece cannot support me since it cannot even support their own people. When I got a refugee status, I went from Lesbos to Athens and from there to Patras. I stayed about 1 month in Patras, but the situation there was very bad. There was no chance to live there or to leave Greece.
There are a lot of people who come in Plaza and they're asking for housing, and they have been pushed back either by in Macedonia when they were trying to cross the border, or in Serbia when they reached Serbia. So we have too many cases like that. People who tried to leave and they were returned.
If people try to leave Greece and you get arrested, you get pushed back to the island that you came from. You go back to prison. This is what is happening. But people don't want to move, but the situation is forcing them to move.
I haven't registered myself in any for asylum anywhere. I don't want to be in Greece especially, because the process is so lengthy, so long. I just don't want to get in it. I don't have time for this. I mean, if I will apply here, it will take me at least 4 or 5 years to get approved. And for a relocation thing or all these things, I don't want to stay here for this time. So I have to find a place where I can go and where I can use my trade, what I know, and have some kind of respectable life.
Yeah, in a way, EU is forcing Greece to be the watchdog of its borders. At the same time, Greece is accepting that. All these policies that actually of bordering, of putting multiple borders, not only in the, let's say, national border, like right now, for example, for people to come from Turkey, there is a very harsh border within Turkey, that people are imprisoned in camps. And then there is the Aegean border, and then if they get to the island, they have also to cross another border to get to the mainland. So it's like putting many borders in a filtering way. And I think the target is really to create people who are docile, people who will not resist, who will not fight against these policies, and who will not also fight in other places. Like they will accept very bad labor conditions, for example, because they are migrants. I think people should fight more for the right to freedom, the right to freedom of movement, the right to stay, actually.
According to the Dublin regulations, migrants can only apply once for asylum in the country where they first entered the European Union. If they try to apply for asylum again in another European country, they can be sent back. In practice, These deportations from other EU countries to Greece were stopped in 2011. The European Court of Human Rights decided that Greece was unable to provide protection to refugees which met basic human rights standards. But, in March 2017, Brussels gave the green light to send asylum seekers back to Greece again. Germany and other countries announced they would return people in need of international protection back to Greece, turning a blind eye to their fate.
This is not a movement or a gesture of solidarity, by no means. Having the situation, the economic situation, having all this distress from the local people, having all this distress from the refugee community, and on top of that you bring more refugees and asylum seekers from Europe, this is, obviously it's not sustainable. I mean, and besides, who thinks of people who don't want to go back to Greece? I mean, they went to another European state for a reason. How can you not respect their life and to treat them as a football back and forth? So people are treated as a football, and the states are also being treated as a football depending on where they are. There's also this assumption that it was your choice, you sought for asylum in Greece, which is not the case, because if you don't seek for asylum, you're deported.
Europeans don't know many things. There are many facts they're not aware of. For example, our living conditions here, the situation of people like us, who are in Asia, our fellow human beings in Africa, and all this situation which is going on right now. They don't know about all those people who oppress and exploit us with their money. I believe we all have to know these things.
We are giving up with our values and what have made Europe in some way a different place, and this is not the case anymore, and it's because it's easier, I guess, to do that than to really think on what's going on in our society and why it's more and more difficult for the middle class and the poor class to live.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm a refugee, my friend, but I'm also human like you, and I'm not dirty.
There is no country in the world which is not built without a refugee. The big nations are built by refugees.
I don't believe on borders. I don't believe on nations. We are all citizens of this world. Like Socrates said, I'm not Athenian or a Greek. I'm just a citizen of this world.
European leaders speak about solidarity and unity. The facts tell a different tale. On a European level, solidarity is still reserved for people holding a passport from a European country. And even the southern member states of the European Union are considered to be second-class Europeans. Hit by an economic crisis and subsequent punitive neoliberal solutions imposed by the EU, Greece is unable to provide adequate services, even for its own citizens. On top of this, it has to accommodate all the refugees trapped within its borders. The people suffering most from this politics are migrants who fled war, persecution and poverty, searching for a respectable life. What will be the future of the refugees trapped in Greece? Will a whole new generation grow up without basic rights or a place in society? The people of Europe will have to decide if they settle for a cheap, second-rate unity by closing the borders, or if they are able to show real solidarity and allow all humans to live a self-determined life in the country they choose.